I adore this thing. I could just stand here and look at it for days.
Look, I think we can all agree here these things are immensely cool, and that V8 engine looked very tempting, but mechanically speaking, it's
so good. Okay, so look, obviously we try to be as unbiased as we possibly can be in our videos, but I do need to warn you of something. I am a massive, massive fan of the B8 RS4. I mean, surely this is everything you'd ever want in a car. It's practical, loaded with features. Visually, it flies under the radar, but looks so aggressive and sophisticated when doing it. Then there's its utterly gorgeous V8 engine and copious amounts of quattro all-wheel drive grip. And thanks to some pretty extreme depreciation, these things are looking very, very tempting on the used market. However, it is an aging Audi, and as we've seen in plenty of our other videos, that can raise a few concerns. For example, starting with the exterior, it is absolutely critical that all of the drainage channels are clean and cleared. Now, this is something that we see on quite a lot of Volkswagen Group vehicles, but if the drainage channels haven't been cleared, water can build up, it can find its way into the interior, eventually into some of the electronics, and trust me, that can create all sorts of dramas. Now, the hot tip here is just to pour water all over the car, and you should see it draining out behind the front wheel arches. If it's not pouring out, yeah, that's a concern. However, possibly even more concerning is that we do know of cars that do have perfectly maintained drainage channels, but they're still having water leakage issues because the little plastic connectors and tubes that send the water in the right direction, they're starting to deteriorate, and then they can leak water into the interior. Now, annoyingly, to replace some of these tubing and the little connectors, it can mean removing the entire headlining out of the car and a copious amount of the interior, and it's just a pain in the ass, and if you get someone else to do it, it could cost you a small fortune. Now, if you're looking for evidence of this water leaking into the electronics issue, some owners are finding it shows itself in just weird electronic gremlins around the exterior. For example, the sunroof not opening or closing properly, the keyless entry or the door locks just playing up, or maybe the power windows or mirrors just not operating properly. However, these electronic issues, they might have nothing to do with any water leakage issues. It just might mean that their connectors have seen better days. Look, basically, if you're in the market for one of these, make sure that anything that is powered by electricity actually does what it should. Now, also, just on the sunroof, this is definitely more prevalent on the B8 RS5 coupe that we reviewed recently, but it does still happen on the RS4. The sunroof can have a whole bunch of different dramas. Sometimes it can be the motor failing, sometimes it can be a calibration issue, or sometimes it's just out of alignment. Also, there can be a problem with the little wind deflector that pops up when the roof is open. When the roof tries to close, it runs into the deflector and it thinks that there's some sort of obstruction, like you've got your hand stuck there, and it just refuses to close over and over again. I actually had this problem on an A8 recently, and it's just bloody infuriating. Now, this is a very serious performance car. However, it is kind of pushing 2 tons in weight. So if you drive it in the way it was engineered and designed to, it can have a hell of an appetite for tyres. And also, obviously, to get the most out of this car, it is going to require premium performance rubber, and that stuff doesn't come cheap. Also, these have become renowned for some suspension component wear, especially upper control arm bushers. Plenty of owners recommend not fitting the OEM replacement Audi stuff and just getting some aftermarket parts instead. And the same can also be said for cars fitted with DRC, or dynamic ride control. This is just Audi's adaptive damper system. Unfortunately, they have developed a pretty poor reputation for reliability, and they're bloody expensive to repair. Some owners have been quoted in excess of $2,000 per corner to fix it with the Audi OEM stuff. Therefore, it probably makes more sense to ditch that entire system and fit quality aftermarket parts instead. And then with the brakes, it can be a very similar story here. Good news first, these brakes, if you're driving the thing normally, they can last 50 or 60,000 kilometers. But when it does come time to replacing them, obviously the Audi OEM stuff is going to be insanely expensive. Owners have been quoted in excess of $3,500. But again, we agree with the owners and the technicians here. Do your homework and find some quality aftermarket parts, because quite often that stuff can save you money. It can perform just as well, if not even better than the OEM stuff, and it can last longer. Now, our hot tip here when it comes to aftermarket brakes for the RS4 is to get in touch with our mates at Automotive Superstore, because they have a huge range of options, and chances are you're going to save yourself some money. Actually, you know what? It's not just the brakes here. When it comes to suspension components, infotainment systems, speakers, car care products, four-wheel drive accessories, performance parts, Automotive Superstore have over 400,000 different parts and accessories to choose from. Plus, to make sure that you're getting exactly the right parts for your car, all you've got to do is type in your reg code of the website and it will filter down to what will suit best. Also, to make life super convenient, they will ship to your door Australia-wide, so you can do all of this from home. Honestly, you're gonna love them as much as we do. Check them out via the link below. And then we come to one of the most tempting aspects of the RS4 is what they currently cost. Now, you've got to remember, these things brand new here in Australia were retailing for around about $150,000. This one, with all the options fitted, more like $175,000. However, currently, they're swapping hands from about $40,000 to $80,000. Now, if you bought one of these brand spanking new, I'm really, really sorry about that news. But if you are in the used market, this could be awesome, because for around about the same price as a brand new Volkswagen Golf GTI or a Volkswagen Golf R, you could potentially buy arguably one of the greatest Audi RS cars ever created. Can you tell how much I love this? Now, we will get into the beautiful design in just a moment, but we should say quite a few owners mentioned just how excellent the fit and finish and even the paint quality is on these. Some even mentioned that they've now taken delivery of much newer RS model cars, and this thing surpasses the new ones in terms of overall quality. Don't get us wrong, we're not talking, you know, Toyota Century levels of amazing build quality, but it's pretty bloody good. Also, in Australia, the vast majority on the used market will just be the single trim spec RS4, although these could be optioned in about 1,000 different ways. Although there was also a very limited run of Nagaro Selection editions that commemorated the 20th anniversary of the RS2 Avant, although good luck finding a Nagaro or an RS2 on the used market these days. And then we come to the outrageously good looks. Now, obviously this is a fast performance wagon, and that is easily the coolest genre of car in the world because it sort of hides in plain sight. You know, I feel like if you know, you know, and that is the epitome of cool. But specifically with the RS4, look, I could just go on about this design for days because it is just design perfection. There are highlights though. These intakes down here, I love that this little blade section looks almost like a fang. These pumped arches, front and back, that is just sexy. The wheel design works with the entire car design so perfectly. And then all the satin silver finishes, it's just this, it's not too glitzy, not too jewelry, it just highlights the design perfectly. I adore this thing. I could just stand here and look at it for days. Now, in terms of what can go wrong with the interior, we do need to talk about something that is a bit prevalent in a lot of Volkswagen Group vehicles, and it's just potential electronic gremlins. Now, these electronic gremlins can show themselves in a few different ways, like the power windows playing up, infotainment system issues, even climate control issues. Also, owners have reported that the instrument gauge cluster can just show up with a Christmas tree amount of warning lights, even though there's nothing actually wrong with the car at all. Actually, just on the instrument cluster, first of all, isn't it lovely that it's actual analog dials and just not another screen that we see in so many other cars? However, there can be a circuit board issue with it and it can flicker, and worst case scenario, it can even show false readings on some of the dials. Now, fixing this instrument cluster circuit board issue, according to the owners, actually isn't that bad and not too expensive. The hot tip is just to join the owners groups and the forums, because there are so many great tutorials and these guys have such great advice. We joined them to do the research for this video. Thank you guys so much for helping us, but just priceless information. Now, the MMI infotainment system, okay, it is starting to feel its age, but I tend to agree with the owners here. I don't necessarily think that's such a bad thing. Okay, yeah, the screen resolution isn't fantastic. The reversing camera especially pretty bad. And if you want Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you're gonna have to retrofit that stuff, but that's totally possible. But actually using it is super intuitive and actually really enjoyable. And speaking of enjoyable, I tell you what, this interior is a place that I could spend many hours of my life. It is wonderful in here. First of all, the ergonomics are absolutely spot on. Seat comfort great, loads of adjustability, everything's so easy to get to. It's, you know, it's based on an A4, which isn't really a driver's car, but with this sort of interior, with all the little highlights of carbon fiber and these bucket seats, it feels like a driver's car. Even in terms of wear and tear, now, these are soft leathers, and that generally means not great for resilience. It can mark and scratch really easily. But when you talk to the owners, these interiors seem to be very resilient. I mean, even in this one, it's pushing 120,000 Ks, but the leather is in great condition. Even on the steering wheel, there's still a little bit of texture left. Armrest, really good. Armrests here, really good. Plus, there's just an immense feeling of quality. Like the fit and finish of everything is absolutely spot on. Also, it's not what we'd call perceived quality. Now, what I mean from that is that one of this car's competitors, the AMG C63 that we reviewed recently, yeah, it looks beautiful, but behind the scenes, you can kind of tell it's just all really cheap and nasty plastic. Like the door handles squeak, but in this, like everything is just so solid. The build quality in here and fit and finish is easily superior to the AMG. And being an Audi, the overall design and layout is just near perfection. Again, I know rattling on about it, but the fit and finish, it's not Lexus levels of fit and finish, but it is bloody close. Even as far as actually living with it in terms of practicality, pretty good. You've got a decent sized glove box there. You've got an ashtray and a cigarette lighter. That is disappointing, but you know, it's there. 2 cup holders and one small little one for small pretentious coffees like a double ristretto or a macchiato, which is really handy. Spot perfectly designed for your phone just there. Cubby bin here. Door bins, but they're not lined with any kind of felt, so if you put a hard bottle in there, it's going to rattle around a little bit. Got sunglasses holder up here and secret cubby holes under both the front seats as well, which is really, really handy. Nothing down there, nothing under there. So for practicality, pretty good. And then as far as what stuff you're going to get in terms of features and equipment, I feel like this generation of Audi RS cars absolutely nail it. There's enough bells and whistles in here to keep you occupied and comfy, but then not so many features that there's just 1,000 things that could potentially go wrong. Again, just great. Plus, being an Audi, there is a huge range of optional extras, and aside from the inherent safety all-wheel drive grip can provide, the safety systems include all the usual suspects, although with its age, you can forget about any active or autonomous technology. But look, as we mentioned with the exterior, when you're in here, just push every single button and make sure every function works, even including some of the automatic stuff. Throw some water at the windscreen and just make sure that the rain sensing wipers actually work. Now, when you do that, just check that the wipers aren't shuddering and making a weird noise, and make sure they actually wipe properly. If they don't rush out and buy OEM replacements, because like so many car brands, they can be super expensive. Instead, save yourself some money and hit the Wipertech link down below. Ordering them online is so easy, fitting them is a breeze, and when you get yourself a set via that link below, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. However, if you happen to lend us your car to feature, just like Ryan that has lent us this one, you're going to get a set for free as a thank you present. Hey Ryan, you're a bloody legend, mate. Thank you. Now in the back seat, I'm exactly 13 centimeters taller than iconic Pink Floyd drummer, car collector, and RS4 owner Nick Mason. This is in my driving position. It's not great, to be honest. My knees are like smashed up against the back of the seat, even when they're in the little cutouts for my knees. The seats are sort of comfy, but not amazing. Also, my head is just touching the roof a little bit. This car does have the panoramic roof, so it eats into the headroom a little bit. Honestly, I was hoping for more space back here. It's nice to look at, but not that nice to sit in. As far as features and practicality, you've got your own air vents, you've got a power outlet there, you've got an ashtray. You've got netting in case you go fishing and you need to keep your barramundi somewhere. There are door bins. I don't know how you're going to get to them if you've got legs. Like that's near, I can't move my knee across enough to get down to it. You've got some sunshades here, which is pretty handy. That's about it. Oh, hang on. Oh, bloody hell. Pull down armrest with, whoa, a first aid kit and storage for it just there, and cup holders that slide out like so. That works. Oh, wait. There we go, that's good. And then in the boot, like all wagons, this is where these things really rock. Here's the thing, right? Yeah, some SUVs might have technically more space, but at least with this, you don't have to load things up and into it. You can just slide them in and out. Although in the RS4, there is a bit of a load lip here, so sliding in and out might be a little bit more of a challenge, but so much room for activities, and even more room for activities when you pop all the seats flat. And then when it comes to the driving experience, well, unfortunately, there are a handful of complaints. The first one, and look, this does seem to be a bit of an inherent issue with a lot of Volkswagen Group cars, even though this thing has been calibrated to be a pretty serious performance car, the steering, no matter what mode you're in, it just lacks sort of any real feel or nuance. I know that sounds like car journalist wanker speak, but it's true. Now look, for some of you, you're not going to care about this because you're more focused on things like acceleration times, but the argument against that is that you're very rarely ever going to be able to really explore the acceleration of this car. The one thing you're going to be doing all the time is using the steering wheel, so it would be nice if it just had, I don't know, a bit more communication about it. The next complaint has to do with the transmission, and look, it's typical dual clutch stuff here. Around town at slow speeds, it can be a little bit clunky and a bit lost. Once you are up to speed but and having some fun and pulling those pedals, the shifts are near instant. And then possibly the final concern with this is that because the model that replaced it, the B9 RS4, is seriously rapid, that this thing might just feel a bit slow and old these days. Well, no, not at all. This is awesome. See, the argument that we have sort of against the B9 is that now it is so effortlessly fast. Every time you flex your right foot, you're actually backing out of it instantly, otherwise it's, hello officer, here, take my license. Whereas in this one, okay, it's not as insanely rapid as the B9, but you get to enjoy the engine for longer periods of time. It's almost like Audi prioritized the actual feeling of driving this car rather than just how quickly we can get to our destination. And we also argue that if you're sitting there going, nah, the B8's too slow for me, well, you're being a wanker. Honestly, chances are you don't have anywhere near the driving talent to get the best out of a Corolla, let alone something like this. And anyway, yeah, okay, the B9's faster, but it doesn't sound like this. Oh, it's so good, it's so good. But then on the flip side, flick it into comfort mode and the personality shifts. Around town in comfort mode, the car becomes completely docile. Okay, on these terrible roads, the ride is still pretty bloody firm, and I think some aftermarket struts would make a bit of a difference. But there's no rattles, there's no weird sounds. Also, even because of the size of it and how good the vision is out of it, parking is a breeze, dealing with traffic's no problem. But the whole time, no matter what driving mode you're in, this car, it feels special and it has genuine character. Honestly, to drive, this thing is a near perfect car. Although, if something were mechanically to go wrong with it, you may wish you'd never heard of the word RS4. However, unfortunately, I can't elaborate on this because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know who is? It's Jim.
Look, overall, they're not considered unreliable, but they can have a few issues. Little things like ignition coils and spark plugs, look, that happens to all engines. Often that just causes a misfire, not a huge deal really. Another source of misfire and air-fuel ratio complications can be problems with the breather system. The PCV system on these is unnecessarily complicated. There's a lot of parts here and splits and leaks happen all the time. These engines are known for oil consumption, so you will have to top it up between services. And just on that oil consumption, it is much, much worse if these engines have ever been neglected. Servicing them later in life after they've had some neglect, that won't fix the oil consumption. They use a lot of oil. Cooling system on these, it is pretty complicated, typical for an Audi of this age. A lot of plastic parts and a lot of places for potential leaks. The water pump, the thermostat housing, they are also prone to leaks. And I'll just talk more about that water pump a bit later. Oil leaks too, they are prone to leak oil. Valve covers, sump gasket and the valley cover gasket, they're probably the main offenders. And speaking of leaks, a few reports of high pressure fuel pump leaks as well, although that is not terribly common. Now the timing chains on these, they can be a little problematic. There are 4 separate timing chains, each with their own guides and tensioners and gears. There's a lot of moving parts in there, and that means a lot that can go wrong. Now I should mention that one of those chains is responsible for driving the internal drive shaft, which is there to drive the integrated power steering pump and the water pump. Now, very integrated, very compact, but unnecessarily complicated, and the water pump definitely is prone to fail. Now these timing chains, if it has been neglected or if it has high mileage, that's when you should start worrying about them. In some cases you will hear a timing chain rattle, which is much worse when you start it from a cold start. If you're hearing a rattle and it's there for longer, or if it's there when the car warms up, you really need to act on that, because if the chain or any of those chains should break, it can lead to a catastrophic engine failure. Now these timing chains, it's not a quick and easy job. They are at the back of the engine, which a lot of Euro stuff, they do that. But if you need to change the timing chains or any of the guides or tensioners, it's engine out, it's subframe down, it's gearbox out, it's a huge disassembly process. It is very time consuming, and it is very expensive. The labour's expensive and the parts are expensive. These V8s are actually right up there with probably one of the most complicated domestic engines you can get. The design of them, they cram a lot into a very small space, which is, you know, a really great engineering feat. But the trouble is, they're very cramped, access is a problem, and to work on them, it's very time consuming, and as I said before, very expensive too. Now the 7-speed DSG in these, as Adam alluded to, they are a bit rough. They do a lot of weird shifting and lurching at low and medium speeds. That is a characteristic of these gearboxes and also part of the transmission cooling strategy. They tend to set it up so there is less slip on the clutches, which keeps the overall transmission temperatures down, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It does help them last. They can have issues with their clutch packs and the mechatronics units too. That is less likely if the transmission has been well maintained and more likely if the vehicle's been modified. The rest of the driveline on these, it does have to be treated properly. The transfer case and the differentials, they should all be serviced every 50,000 kilometres. Not cheap, but nothing on these vehicles to maintain is cheap, but it is money well spent. Now, just looping back to the V8 and the V8 ownership experience. Now, what I find disappointing for the owners in these things is that how can Ford, GM and Toyota build really powerful and robust V8s that are really very reliable, yet for some reason Audi can't? Now, if you are genuinely interested in buying one of these, or if you just want a good laugh, go and check out our ReDriven cheat sheet. We list all the common mechanical issues and so much more. It's in the link below.
So look, we understand that this video might give you the impression that the RS4 is just all doom and gloom, and obviously you should never ever consider buying one. But that's not necessarily the case. The key to a great ownership experience with a used RS4 is to only consider examples that have had absolutely meticulous service histories. And the good news is they are out there. This is a true enthusiast car, and there are plenty of absolutely mint examples out there that have been meticulously maintained by dedicated fans. And trust us, it is worth paying extra for those cars. Do not, and I repeat, do not buy an RS4 that has been an ex-lease vehicle or has even the slightest hint of a sketchy history. Look, I totally understand. They look like bargains on the used market, but I promise you, it is going to bite you in the ass. And we think it goes without saying, even if you do find a perfect example, it's probably best that you have a very healthy, in case the RS4 shits itself, bank account at the ready for a potential rainy day. But look, with how utterly wonderful the RS4 is to sit in and look at and drive and live with and just be around, if you can afford it and you've maybe got a second car at the ready in case this one needs to get some work done, yeah, absolutely buy one. Although, what if this isn't enough car for you? What if you're some sort of a cashed up driving god and you can control all of the horsepowers really easily? Maybe something like this is more for you. But if you weren't to buy this crazy thing or this crazy thing, what other crazy performance wagon would you buy? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. But I tend to agree. Plus, to make sure that it's really intuitive and it's just, who's that? Sounds like Stranger Things.